What started as a simple shopping trip to find a dress for her daughter's graduation turned into the most devastating public humiliation of Sarah's life. But what happened next would shake the entire luxury fashion industry to its core. Sometimes, the most unassuming people hold the keys to empires you never knew existed. Sarah Martinez had always believed that kindness cost nothing but was worth everything. At 42, she lived by simple principles that her grandmother had taught her. Treat everyone with respect, judge no one by their appearance, and remember that true wealth comes from the richness of your character, not your bank account. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That Thursday morning in downtown Chicago began like countless others. Sarah woke up in her modest two-bedroom apartment, made coffee in her favorite chipped mug, and checked her phone for messages from her 18-year-old daughter, Emma, who was finishing her final semester at Northwestern University. Emma's graduation was just 2 weeks away, and Sarah wanted to look her absolute best for such an important milestone. Sarah had been saving money for months, putting aside $20 here and there from her salary as a social work coordinator at the local community center. She had finally accumulated enough to buy something special, something that would make her feel confident and proud as she watched her daughter walk across that stage to receive her diploma. She chose her outfit carefully that morning, selecting a comfortable navy cardigan that she had owned for 3 years, paired with dark jeans and her reliable black flats. Her shoulder-length brown hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and she applied just a touch of mascara and lip balm. Sarah had never been one for elaborate makeup routines or expensive beauty treatments. She believed that genuine warmth and sincerity were far more attractive than any cosmetic enhancement. The spring air was crisp as Sarah walked the 6 blocks to Michigan Avenue, where the city's most prestigious shopping district gleamed under the morning sun. She had researched several stores online and had her heart set on visiting Lumiere Boutique, an exclusive designer shop that specialized in elegant formal wear. The online reviews promised exceptional quality and timeless pieces that would be perfect for special occasions. As Sarah approached the boutique, she felt a flutter of nervous excitement in her stomach. The storefront was stunning, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased mannequins draped in flowing silk gowns and tailored suits that looked like works of art. The gold lettering spelling out Lumiere gleamed against the pristine white facade, and even the sidewalk in front of the store seemed to sparkle with cleanliness. Sarah paused for a moment outside, checking her reflection in the window and smoothing down her cardigan. She reminded herself that she belonged here just as much as anyone else. Her money was as good as anyone's, and she was here for a legitimate purpose, to buy a beautiful dress for her daughter's graduation. The moment Sarah pushed open the heavy glass door, she was enveloped by an atmosphere of luxury that felt almost suffocating. The interior was all gleaming marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and strategically placed mirrors that reflected light throughout the space. Soft, classical music played from hidden speakers, and the air carried the faint scent of expensive perfume and leather. 2 sales associates were positioned near the front of the store, both impeccably dressed in sleek black outfits that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. The first woman, whose nameplate read Victoria, was tall and willowy with platinum blonde hair styled in a perfect chignon. Her colleague, named Melissa, had dark hair swept into an elaborate updo and wore jewelry that caught the light with every movement. When Victoria noticed Sarah entering, her professional smile flickered for just a moment. Sarah caught the brief look of assessment that passed over her face, taking in her casual attire and practical accessories. Victoria's expression quickly returned to neutral professionalism, but Sarah had seen enough to know that her first impression had not been favorable. "Good morning," Sarah said warmly, approaching the counter with genuine enthusiasm. "I'm looking for something special for my daughter's graduation, perhaps a cocktail dress or something appropriate for an evening ceremony." Victoria exchanged a quick glance with Melissa before responding. "Of course. What price range were you considering?" Her tone was polite but distant, lacking the warmth and excitement that Sarah had expected from a high-end boutique. "I have about $800 to spend," Sarah replied confidently. She had worked hard to save that money, and while it might not be a fortune the sum, it represented months of careful budgeting and sacrifice on her part. Victoria's eyebrows raised slightly, and Sarah noticed Melissa suppress what looked like a smirk. "800," Victoria repeated slowly. "I see. Well, most of our pieces start at around $1,500, but let me see what we might have in our more accessible collection." The way Victoria said accessible made it sound like a dirty word. Sarah felt a prickle of discomfort but pushed it aside. Perhaps the woman was simply being honest about their inventory. Victoria led Sarah toward the back of the store, past racks of stunning gowns and elegant suits that Sarah couldn't help but admire. They stopped at a small section that seemed separate from the main collections, where a few dresses hung on a sparse rack. The pieces here were clearly different from the rest of the store's merchandise. Simpler in design, made from less luxurious fabrics, and bearing small tags that indicated they were from previous seasons. "These are some options that might work within your budget," Victoria said, her voice carrying just a hint of condescension. "They're from our clearance collection, but I'm sure you'll find something suitable." Sarah examined the dresses carefully. While they weren't as elaborate as the pieces she had seen in the front of the store, they were still beautiful and well-made. She selected a navy blue dress with a classic A-line silhouette and held it up against herself in front of a nearby mirror. "This is lovely," Sarah said genuinely. "Could I try it on?" Victoria hesitated. "The fitting rooms are currently being cleaned," she said quickly. "Perhaps you could come back another time." Sarah checked her watch. It was barely 10:30 in the morning, and the store had only been open half an hour. It seemed unlikely that the fitting rooms would need cleaning so early in the day, but she gave Victoria the benefit of the doubt. "How long until they're available?" Sarah asked politely. "It's hard to say," Victoria replied vaguely. "The cleaning process can take quite a while." At that moment, another customer entered the boutique. Sarah turned to see an elegant woman in her 50s dressed in a cream-colored designer suit and carrying a handbag that Sarah recognized as a limited-edition piece worth several $1,000s. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup flawless, and her jewelry clearly expensive. Victoria's entire demeanor changed instantly. Her face lit up with genuine warmth and enthusiasm as she practically glided across the store to greet the new arrival. "Mrs. Harrison," Victoria exclaimed with delight. "How wonderful to see you again. I have some absolutely exquisite new pieces that just came in from Milan. I think you're going to love them." Sarah watched Victoria personally escort Mrs. Harrison to the front of the store, showing her the most beautiful gowns and offering detailed explanations about the designers, the fabrics, and the craftsmanship. Within minutes, Victoria was leading Mrs. Harrison toward the fitting rooms, the same fitting rooms that had supposedly been unavailable due to cleaning just moments earlier. The contrast in treatment was so stark that Sarah felt physically sick to her stomach.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She stood there holding the navy dress, feeling invisible and unwanted in a space where she had every right to be. The message was crystal clear. She didn't belong here, and no one was going to pretend otherwise. Melissa approached Sarah with a forced smile. "I'm sorry, but those fitting rooms are reserved for our VIP customers," she explained as if this were a perfectly reasonable policy. "Perhaps you could hold the dress up to yourself in the mirror and get a sense of the fit that way?" Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. "I'd like to speak with your manager," she said quietly but firmly. Melissa's expression hardened slightly. "I am the manager," she lied smoothly, "and I'm trying to help you find something within your budget. These clearance pieces are really your best option." From across the store, Sarah could hear Victoria laughing with Mrs. Harrison, discussing weekend plans in the Hamptons and an upcoming charity gala. The sound of their easy conversation only highlighted Sarah's growing sense of alienation and humiliation. "I'd like to try on this dress," Sarah repeated, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. "I'm a paying customer, and I believe I deserve the same courtesy as anyone else." Melissa's facade of politeness finally cracked. "Look," she said, lowering her voice, but not bothering to hide her irritation. "I think there might be some confusion here. This is a high-end boutique. Our average customer spends several $1,000s per visit. These clearance dresses are really more of a courtesy we offer, but they're final sale only, no returns, no exchanges." The implication was unmistakable. Take it or leave it, but don't expect to be treated like a valued customer. Sarah felt something shift inside her. The initial embarrassment was giving way to a quiet fury that she had rarely experienced in her life. She had spent years working with disadvantaged communities, advocating for people who were dismissed and marginalized by society. She knew injustice when she saw it, and she was seeing it now. "I understand your policies," Sarah said calmly, "but I still need to try on this dress before I purchase it. That's a reasonable request from any customer." Melissa's eyes flashed with annoyance. She walked over to Victoria and whispered something in her ear. Victoria glanced over at Sarah with obvious displeasure, then returned her attention to Mrs. Harrison with an apologetic smile.
"I'm so sorry for the interruption, Mrs. Harrison," Victoria said loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Some customers require more hand-holding than others." Mrs. Harrison looked over at Sarah with curious disdain, taking in her casual outfit with the same dismissive assessment that the sales associates had made. Sarah felt exposed and judged like a specimen under a microscope. Melissa returned to Sarah with a tight smile. "I've spoken with my colleague, and we've decided to make an exception. You can use the fitting room, but we'll need to limit your time to 5 minutes." 5 minutes? Sarah had seen Mrs. Harrison disappear into the fitting room 20 minutes ago and emerge multiple times to show Victoria different outfits. But Sarah was being given 5 minutes, as if her time and her business were somehow less valuable? The fitting room was as luxurious as the rest of the store, with soft lighting, plush carpeting, and a 3-way mirror that showed every angle. Sarah tried on the navy dress and was pleased to find that it fit her perfectly. The color complemented her complexion, and the cut was flattering without being too revealing. It was exactly what she had been hoping to find. But as she stood there, admiring the dress in the mirror, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. When she peeked out of the fitting room, she saw Melissa positioned nearby, clearly monitoring her every move, as if she might try to steal something. Sarah changed back into her own clothes and emerged from the fitting room with the dress in hand. "I'll take it," she announced, approaching the counter where Victoria had now returned. Victoria looked surprised, as if she hadn't expected Sarah to actually make a purchase. "Oh, well, as Melissa mentioned, all clearance items are final sale. No returns, no exchanges, no exceptions." "I understand," Sarah replied, pulling out her wallet. As Victoria processed the transaction, her movements were deliberately slow, and her attitude remained cold. She folded the dress carelessly, stuffed it into a plain shopping bag without any tissue paper or protective covering, and handed Sarah the receipt without making eye contact. "Thank you for your business," Victoria said, in a tone that suggested she felt anything but grateful. Sarah was about to leave when she heard Victoria say something to Melissa that made her blood boil. "I can't believe she actually bought something," Victoria whispered, not quite quietly enough. "I was hoping she'd just leave. These clearance shoppers always make such a mess and waste so much time." Sarah stopped in her tracks. She turned around slowly, her heart pounding with a combination of hurt and rage that she had never experienced before. "Excuse me," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly across the store. "Did you just refer to me as a clearance shopper?" Victoria's face flushed red. That's not what I meant." "What did you mean?" Sarah asked, stepping closer to the counter. The store had gone completely silent.
Mrs. Harrison had emerged from the fitting room and was watching the confrontation with obvious fascination. Even the classical music seemed to fade into the background as everyone waited to see what would happen next. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Melissa interjected, moving to stand beside Victoria in a show of solidarity. "The only misunderstanding," Sarah said quietly, "is that I thought I was walking into a professional establishment where customers are treated with respect, regardless of their appearance or their budget. Instead, I've been subjected to discrimination, condescension, and outright rudeness." Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air.
Ma'am, I think you're being overly sensitive. We provide the same service to all our customers. The same service? Sarah's voice rose slightly. You told me the fitting rooms were being cleaned, then immediately offered them to another customer. You referred to me as a clearance shopper who makes a mess and wastes time. You processed my purchase like you were handling contaminated material. By now, several other customers had entered the store and were witnessing the scene. Sarah could see phones being discreetly pulled out, and she realized that her humiliation was about to become public entertainment. Mrs. Harrison stepped forward with a concerned expression. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, though her tone suggested she was more interested in drama than resolution. "Everything is fine," Melissa said quickly. "This customer was just leaving." "Actually," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength, "everything is not fine. I've just been treated with blatant discrimination because I don't look like your typical customer. I work hard for my money. I saved for months to make this purchase, and I deserve the same respect and courtesy that you showed to everyone else who walked through that door." Victoria had gone from red to pale. "Ma'am, I think you're being overly sensitive. We provide the same service to all our customers." "If you're unhappy with your purchase, I already explained that we have a no-return policy." "This isn't about returning the dress," Sarah said. "This is about basic human decency. This is about treating people with dignity regardless of how much money they have to spend." The confrontation was drawing more attention. Sarah could see other customers whispering and pointing, and she realized that some of them were recording the exchange on their phones. Her moment of private humiliation was becoming a public spectacle. "I think you should leave," Melissa said firmly. "You're disrupting our other customers." Sarah looked around at the faces staring at her. Some showed curiosity, others embarrassment, and a few displayed the same condescending judgment she had experienced from the sales staff. She felt small and powerless, outnumbered in a space where she clearly wasn't welcome. "You're right," Sarah said quietly, clutching her shopping bag. "I should leave. But not because I've done anything wrong. I should leave because this place doesn't deserve my business." As Sarah walked toward the door, she heard Victoria say to Mrs. Harrison, "I'm so sorry you had to witness that. Some people just don't understand appropriate behavior in an upscale establishment." The comment was the final blow. Sarah stopped with her hand on the door handle, her entire body trembling with rage and humiliation. She had been polite, respectful, and patient throughout the entire ordeal, only to be dismissed as someone who didn't understand appropriate behavior. Sarah turned around one last time, and in that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed a number she rarely called during business hours. Her husband David was in the middle of board meetings in Manhattan, but she needed him now more than ever. "David," she whispered when he answered, stepping outside the boutique for privacy. "Something terrible happened. I'm at this designer store and they've been treating me like garbage because of how I look." David's voice immediately sharpened with concern. "What store? What happened?" Through tears, Sarah told him everything. The dismissive looks, the lies about fitting rooms, the whispered insults, the complete lack of respect. With each detail, she could hear David's breathing become more controlled, more dangerous. "Put the manager on the phone right now," David said, his voice carrying an edge Sarah had only heard twice in their 20-year marriage. Sarah walked back into Lumiere Boutique, where Victoria and Melissa were still chatting with Mrs. Harrison about the disruption. The other customers had dispersed, but the atmosphere remained tense.
"Excuse me," Sarah said, approaching the counter. "My husband would like to speak with the manager." Melissa rolled her eyes dramatically. "Ma'am, I already told you I'm the manager. We're not going to continue this conversation." "The owner of this building would like to speak with whoever is actually in charge," Sarah said quietly, holding out her phone. Victoria laughed dismissively. "The owner of the building? Really? That's the best you can come up with?" Mrs. Harrison looked intrigued by this new development. Several customers had stopped browsing to listen. Sarah placed the phone on speaker. "This is David Chen," came a calm but authoritative voice from the phone. "I'd like to speak with whoever is responsible for the treatment my wife has received at your establishment." Melissa grabbed the phone with an exaggerated sigh. "Mr. Chen, your wife was treated with complete professionalism. If she is upset about our return policy or our inventory limitations, that's not our problem." There was a long pause before David spoke again. "What's your name?" "Melissa Thompson, store manager of Lumiere Boutique." "Melissa, I want you to call your district manager immediately and tell them David Chen is requesting an emergency meeting about customer service protocols at the Michigan Avenue location." Something in David's tone made Melissa's confident expression falter slightly. "Sir, I don't think that's necessary. This was just a simple misunderstanding." "Call them now. Tell them David Chen from Chen Holdings wants to discuss the future of their lease agreement." The blood drained from Melissa's face. Victoria stepped closer, confusion evident in her expression. Mrs. Harrison's eyes widened with recognition at the mention of Chen Holdings. "Chen Holdings?" Melissa whispered. "The company that owns this building, the entire city block, and about 40% of the commercial real estate in downtown Chicago," David's voice came through clearly, "including the space your boutique rents at a rather generous below-market rate." The phone nearly slipped from Melissa's trembling hands. Victoria had gone completely white. Around them, customers began pulling out their phones, recognizing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. "Mr. Chen," Melissa stammered, I had no idea. If I had known who Mrs. Chen was." "That's exactly the problem," David interrupted. "The fact that you treated my wife poorly because you didn't know who she was tells me everything I need to know about your character and your business practices." Mrs. Harrison approached with obvious alarm. "Melissa, is this really David Chen? The David Chen?" Before Melissa could respond, a man in an expensive suit rushed into the store, his face flushed with panic. Sarah recognized him as someone who had been in the back office earlier, presumably the actual store manager. "Mrs. Chen," he said breathlessly, "I'm Marcus Webb, the general manager. I just received a call from our corporate office. I'm so terribly sorry about what happened here today." Victoria and Melissa looked at Marcus in confusion, then at each other with growing horror as the reality of the situation began to sink in. David's voice continued from the phone. "Marcus, I want a complete report on today's incident within the hour. I also want to know why my wife was lied to, discriminated against, and insulted by your staff." Marcus nodded frantically, even though David couldn't see him. "Yes, sir, absolutely. We'll conduct a full investigation immediately." "There's no need for an investigation," Sarah said quietly, taking back her phone. "I experienced everything firsthand. Your employees made it clear that I wasn't welcome here because I don't look like their idea of a typical customer." Marcus turned to Victoria and Melissa with barely controlled fury. "Is this really true? Did you actually treat Mrs. Chen this way?" Victoria was crying now, realizing the magnitude of her mistake. "We didn't know. She looked so ordinary. We thought—" "We thought what?" Marcus demanded. "That it was acceptable to treat anyone poorly based on their appearance?" The store had filled with onlookers, and several people were openly recording the confrontation. Sarah could see the incident was already being shared on social media, with comments flowing in real time. Melissa tried to salvage the situation. "Mr. Webb, we were just following standard protocols for budget-conscious customers. We showed her our clearance section and processed her purchase professionally." "Standard protocols?" Sarah repeated, her voice gaining strength.
Is it standard protocol to lie about fitting room availability, to whisper insults about customers, to treat people like they're beneath you? Mrs. Harrison stepped forward, her earlier smugness replaced by obvious discomfort. I witnessed some of the interaction. The treatment was indeed quite dismissive. Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and his face went even paler. That's our CEO. Mr. Chen, I need to take this call. Put it on speaker, David instructed. I want everyone to hear this. Marcus reluctantly answered the call on speaker. A woman's voice filled the store. Marcus, this is Claire Davidson. I just got off the phone with our legal department and our board of directors. Is it true that staff at your location discriminated against Mrs. Chen? Yes, ma'am, it appears that way, Marcus replied, shooting murderous looks at Victoria and Melissa. Marcus, effective immediately, I want you to terminate the employment of any staff member who was involved in this incident. We cannot and will not tolerate discrimination of any kind. Victoria began sobbing audibly. Please, I need this job. I have student loans and rent payments. You should have thought about that before you decided to treat someone poorly, Claire's voice continued. Our company's reputation is now at risk because of your unprofessional behavior. Melissa tried one last desperate appeal.
Ms. Davidson, we were just trying to manage our high-end inventory appropriately. Mrs. Chen was shopping from clearance items. Did you just defend discrimination by saying she was shopping clearance? Claire's voice was incredulous. Pack your belongings and leave immediately. Security will escort you out. David's voice rejoined the conversation. Claire, I appreciate the swift action, but this incident highlights a deeper problem. How many other customers have been treated this way? How many people have been made to feel unwelcome in spaces they have every right to occupy? You're absolutely right, Mr. Chen. We're implementing mandatory sensitivity training for all staff, and we're reviewing our customer service policies across all locations. Sarah looked around the store at the faces staring at her. Some showed shame, others curiosity, and a few displayed newfound respect. The same people who had witnessed her humiliation were now seeing her vindication. There's something else, David continued. Claire, I want you to know that Chen Holdings will be reevaluating all of our retail partnerships. Companies that don't align with our values regarding equality and respect won't be renewing their leases. The implication sent shockwaves through the store. Mrs. Harrison looked particularly uncomfortable, perhaps realizing her own role in the day's events. Marcus stepped forward desperately. Mr. Chen, Lumiere has been a valued tenant for 8 years. This was an isolated incident. An isolated incident? Sarah finally spoke up. Marcus, your employees told me that some customers require more hand-holding than others. They called me a clearance shopper who makes messes and wastes time. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was systematic discrimination. Claire's voice returned. Mrs. Chen, on behalf of Lumiere Boutique, I offer you our sincerest apologies. We're prepared to offer you a full refund and a significant shopping credit to make this right. Sarah looked down at the shopping bag in her hand, then at the faces around her. I don't want your money, she said quietly. What I want is for you to understand that every person who walks through these doors deserves dignity and respect, regardless of how they're dressed or how much they plan to spend. You're absolutely right, Claire agreed. We're instituting new policies to ensure this never happens again. David's voice came through one final time. Sarah, I'm driving back from New York now. I'll be there in 3 hours to discuss this situation further with the corporate leadership. After the call ended, the store remained silent except for Victoria's quiet crying. Marcus approached Sarah with obvious remorse. Mrs. Chen, I cannot express how sorry I am about what happened here today. This is not representative of our company values. Your company values are demonstrated by your employees' actions. Victoria and Melissa showed me exactly what Lumiere values, and it wasn't treating customers with basic human decency. Mrs. Harrison, who had been silent during the phone conversations, finally approached Sarah. I owe you an apology as well. I watched what was happening and said nothing. That was wrong of me. Sarah nodded acknowledgingly. Thank you for saying that. As security arrived to escort Victoria and Melissa from the premises, Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Marcus, I want you to implement a program where your staff spend time volunteering in community centers and homeless shelters. I want them to interact with people from all walks of life so they understand that worth isn't measured by wealth or appearance. That's an excellent idea. We'll make it a requirement for all customer-facing employees. Sarah looked around the boutique one final time. The beautiful clothes and luxurious atmosphere hadn't changed, but everything else had. The power dynamics had shifted completely, and the people who had dismissed her were now desperately seeking her approval. "I'm keeping the dress," Sarah announced, holding up her shopping bag. "Not because I need it, but because every time I wear it, I'll remember that how we treat others says everything about who we are as people." 3 hours later, David arrived at the boutique with a team of lawyers and corporate executives. By the end of the week, Lumiere had implemented comprehensive changes to their hiring practices, customer service protocols, and staff training programs. Sarah wore the navy dress to Emma's graduation 2 weeks later. As she watched her daughter walk across the stage, she reflected on the lesson she had learned about standing up for herself and others who might not have the power to fight back. The incident at Lumiere became a turning point not just for the company, but for Sarah personally. She realized that her quiet strength and David's resources could be powerful tools for creating positive change. 6 months later, Sarah established a foundation focused on combating discrimination in retail and service industries. The foundation provided training programs, conducted mystery shopping audits, and supported legal action against businesses that engaged in discriminatory practices. Emma, who had heard the full story, told her mother, "You didn't just buy a dress that day. You bought a wake-up call for an entire industry." Sarah smiled, knowing that sometimes the most important purchases aren't made with money, but with courage and the willingness to demand that everyone be treated with dignity and respect. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.